A man's betrayal is a quiet affair, planned in hushed phone calls and clandestine meetings. Richard Sterling believed his was foolproof, sealed with the purchase of a first-class ticket to paradise. He envisioned champagne flutes clinking against a Dubai sunset, the warm hand of his younger mistress in his, and the blissful ignorance of the wife he left behind in a cold London townhouse. He was a master of his universe, a titan of finance whose life was as meticulously curated as his stock portfolio. But some secrets refuse to stay buried, and some wives refuse to remain footnotes in their own stories. Richard was about to learn that the 7-star resort he had chosen for his sin was not a sanctuary, but a stage, and the final act, a brutal public unraveling, was about to begin, orchestrated by the one person he was certain he had left behind. The Rolls-Royce Phantom purred through the gates of the Serafina Grand, as if passing through the gates of Olympus itself. The Dubai heat shimmered off the pristine white marble, creating a mirage of impossible luxury. In the back, Richard Sterling adjusted his Patek Philippe, the cool metal a familiar comfort against his skin. Beside him, Sienna Vance, all shimmering silk and youthful ambition, looked out the window with wide, appreciative eyes. She was 28, a rising star in his firm's marketing department, and the perfect accessory for a man like Richard. Her admiration was a tonic, a validation of the power he had spent 2 decades accumulating. "It's breathtaking, Richard," she whispered, her voice a carefully calibrated mix of awe and seduction. "They don't call it a 7-star resort for nothing, my dear," he replied, his tone laced with the casual arrogance of a man who believed the world was built to serve his desires, the best for the best. He squeezed her hand, a possessive gesture that she accepted with a practiced smile. He thought fleetingly of Catherine. His wife of 15 years was likely at home, overseeing the decorators or planning another charity gala. She was a good wife, a perfect hostess, the stable bedrock upon which he had built his empire. Predictable, dependable, utterly tragically boring. She wouldn't even notice his absence for a day or two, assuming it was another last-minute business trip to Zurich or Hong Kong. The lie had slipped from his lips as easily as breathing. This trip this week with Sienna was his reward, a bonus he was paying himself for a life of hard work and tedious domesticity. The car stopped beneath a portico so grand it could have fronted a palace. Dozens of staff dressed in immaculate cream and gold uniforms moved with silent, synchronized efficiency. The general manager, a tall, impeccably dressed man named Mr. Harrison, stepped forward to open Richard's door personally. "Mr. Sterling, a distinct pleasure to welcome you to the Serafina Grand. We trust your journey was pleasant." "As pleasant as can be," Harrison Richard said, striding into the lobby without a backward glance for Sienna, who was being assisted by a junior valet. He expected her to follow, just as he expected the world to fall in line. The lobby was a cathedral of wealth. A 3-story chandelier composed of thousands of hand-blown crystal shards, shaped like iridescent fish, hung suspended in the cavernous space. Waterfalls cascaded down walls of living green foliage, and the air was scented with a custom fragrance of oud and white tea. Richard's reservation was for the Imperial Sky Suite, a 2-story marvel with a private glass-bottomed pool that cantilevered out from the 60th floor. He had booked it months ago under a corporate pseudonym, a standard precaution. At the private check-in desk, nestled in a secluded alcove, the receptionist's smile faltered for a fraction of a second as she typed his details into her terminal. A flicker of confusion, Richard's senses, honed by years of ruthless boardroom negotiations, picked up on it instantly. "Is there a problem?" he asked, his voice dropping a degree. "No, not at all, Mr. Sterling," the young woman said, recovering quickly. "Just one moment." She made a quiet call, her words too low to hear. Mr. Harrison materialized at Richard's elbow, his smile perfectly, unnervingly serene. "A minor systems glitch, Mr. Sterling. My sincerest apologies. It seems there is a special instruction on your reservation. We are upgrading you." Richard raised an eyebrow. "Upgrading me, Harrison? I booked the Imperial Sky Suite. There are only 2 suites more exclusive than that, and one is the Royal Penthouse, which is typically reserved for state dignitaries." "Indeed," Sir Harrison said smoothly, "which is why the upgrade is so significant. You and your guest have been reassigned to the Celestial Suite by direct order of the new chairperson." The name hung in the air. New chairperson. The Ethelred Hospitality Group, which owned the Serafina Grand, was a blue-chip behemoth owned for decades by a reclusive aging tycoon. Richard had followed the company's stock for years. He hadn't heard any news of a takeover or a change in leadership. New chairperson. Richard probed a sliver of annoyance cutting through his good mood. He disliked surprises he hadn't orchestrated himself. "I wasn't aware Lord Harrington had stepped down." "He has not, sir. He passed away 2 months ago." Harrison said, his expression unreadable. "The estate has been settled, and control of the Ethelred Group has transferred. The new chairperson is taking a very hands-on approach. She personally reviews the guest lists for the signature suites. She insisted on this change for you." A strange feeling, cold and unfamiliar, prickled at the back of Richard's neck. He dismissed it as irritation. Perhaps this new boss was an admirer of his work at Sterling Capital. It was plausible. He was, after all, Richard Sterling. A complimentary upgrade to the most opulent suite in the Middle East was simply his due. He glanced back at Sienna, who was now standing beside him, her eyes wide. The Celestial Suite. Sienna breathed her phone, already in hand, no doubt looking it up. "Richard, that's the one with the private cinema and the retractable starlight roof." His ego, sufficiently stroked Richard's good humor, returned. "Well then, it seems our reputation precedes us. Lead the way, Harrison." As they were escorted to a private elevator, its interior lined with soft white leather, Richard failed to notice the subtle, pitying glances exchanged between the staff members. He didn't see the concierge quietly cancelling his dinner reservations at the hotel's Michelin-starred underwater restaurant. He was too busy picturing the week ahead, a glorious tapestry of indulgence and conquest. He was a king in his castle, a master of his destiny, checking into a gilded cage whose true purpose he couldn't yet fathom. The lock, however, was already turning, and the key was in a hand he would never have suspected. The Celestial Suite was less a hotel room and more a private palace suspended in the sky. Spanning the entire top floor, it was an obscene spectacle of opulence. Walls were inlaid with mother-of-pearl floors, were a mosaic of rare Italian marble, and a grand piano stood silently in a living room the size of a tennis court. The famed retractable roof was open, revealing the deep, star-dusted velvet of the Arabian night sky. A personal butler, a silent man named Javier, greeted them with chilled glasses of crystal champagne. Sienna was ecstatic, her initial awe giving way to a giddy sense of triumph. She twirled through the rooms, filming everything on her phone, narrating her fairy tale ascent for her social media followers. "You guys will not believe this place," she cooed into the camera, carefully keeping Richard's face out of the frame. Talk about living the dream. Richard watched her, a faint smile on his lips. This was what he wanted to be, the benefactor, the source of such breathless delight. Yet the unease that had sparked in the lobby hadn't entirely dissipated. It lingered at the edges of his consciousness, a persistent hum beneath the symphony of luxury. The upgrade was too much, too specific. Why him? Why this suite? He decided to test the waters. "Javier," he called out, his voice resonating with authority. "I'd like to book a private yacht for tomorrow afternoon. A Pershing 9X if you have one available. We'll require a full crew and a chef." Javier bowed slightly. "Of course, Mr. Sterling. I will make the inquiry. However, I should inform you that all unscheduled high-value amenities now require direct approval from the chairperson's office." Richard's smile tightened. "The chairperson, is she personally vetting yacht rentals now? That seems inefficient." "The new chairperson is exceptionally thorough, sir," Javier replied, his face a mask of professional deference. "She has implemented several new protocols to enhance guest security and exclusivity." The word security felt pointed. It was a corporate speak for surveillance. Richard waved a dismissive hand. "Fine. Put in the request. Let me know when it's approved." The approval never came. An hour later, as Sienna was enjoying a soak in the suite's onyx bathtub, surrounded by a flotilla of floating gardenias, Richard received a call on the suite's internal phone system. It was Mr. Harrison. "My apologies for the intrusion. Mr. Sterling," the manager began, his voice as smooth and sterile as the polished marble floors. "Regarding your yacht request, the chairperson's office has denied it." Richard sat up straighter. "Denied it. On what grounds?" "The reason given was scheduling conflicts with a corporate event, sir." "Then book it for the day after tomorrow." There was a slight pause. "Regrettably, sir, the entire Ethelred fleet has been reserved for corporate use for the duration of your stay." Richard's blood began to simmer. This was no longer a quirk. It was a deliberate slight. He was being controlled. "Harrison, I am a guest, paying over $20,000 a night. I expect a certain level of service. This is unacceptable." "I understand your frustration, sir. The new ownership is particular. Perhaps I can arrange a private desert safari for you tomorrow instead. A truly magnificent experience." It felt like a consolation prize, a distraction. "I'll think about it," Richard snapped and hung up. The next crack in his perfect facade appeared that evening. He had planned to take Sienna to Almahara, the resort's famous seafood restaurant, built around a floor-to-ceiling aquarium. When he'd tried to confirm his original booking, the concierge informed him it had been cancelled. "Cancelled by whom?" Richard demanded, standing at the concierge desk, his voice attracting glances from other well-heeled guests. "By the chairperson's office, sir," the concierge said, refusing to meet his eyes. "There is a private function being held there tonight. The entire restaurant is booked. The entire hotel seems to be booked for this phantom corporate event," Richard sneered. "Who is this new chairperson? Is she even here?" "The chairperson is indeed in residence, sir," the concierge offered. "She is hosting tonight's event." The pieces were beginning to form a picture Richard didn't like. He was being boxed in his movements, curtailed within the opulent walls of the resort. He felt less like a valued guest, and more like a specimen under a microscope. He and Sienna ended up having dinner in their suite, a lavish affair served by Javier, but the magic had soured. The exquisite food tasted like ashes in Richard's mouth. He found himself watching the silent butler, wondering what he knew, what he reported. Sienna, oblivious to the undercurrents of tension, was growing bolder. "So when do I get to meet some of your important contacts here?" she asked, swirling a forkful of truffle pasta. "You said this trip could be a big networking opportunity for me." "It's not the right time, Sienna," Richard said curtly. "Why not? We're in the best suite. Everyone must know who you are. We should be at that party downstairs. You should introduce me to this new chairperson. A woman in charge of all this. She sounds like a powerhouse. I could learn a lot from her." The irony was so thick Richard could have choked on it. He looked at Sienna, really looked at her, and saw not a partner, but a liability. Her ambition, which he had once found alluring, now seemed crass and opportunistic. The final straw came the next morning. While Sienna was at the spa, a booking, which, to his surprise, had been approved, Richard decided to purchase a gift for her at the hotel's exclusive Graf boutique. He picked out a diamond tennis bracelet, a bauble that would placate her, and reassert his status as a generous provider. When the sales associate ran his personal black card, she returned with a troubled expression. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Sterling. The card has been declined." "That's impossible," Richard scoffed. "Run it again. The limit on that card is non-existent." "I have, sir. 3 times. The issuing bank reports a security hold placed on the account." A cold dread, sharp and absolute, washed over him. This was not the hotel's doing. This reached beyond the walls of the Serafina Grand. A security hold on his primary personal account could only be initiated by one other person, the joint account holder. His wife. Catherine. He stumbled out of the boutique, his mind racing. It had to be a coincidence. A terrible, bizarre coincidence. Catherine was in London. She knew nothing. She was probably choosing fabric swatches for the new curtains in the drawing room. She wouldn't have the audacity, the knowledge, or the spine to do something like this. He hurried back towards the private elevator, his heart pounding against his ribs. He needed to call his private banker to sort this out. As he rounded a corner, he nearly collided with Mr. Harrison, who was escorting a small, focused group of people. They were dressed in sharp business attire, holding tablets, and speaking in low, serious tones. Forensic accountants Richard recognized instantly. He knew what they looked like. He'd sicked them on enough failing companies to know the scent of blood in the water. "Mr. Orr," Harrison stopped. "Mr. Sterling, I hope you are enjoying your morning." "Where are you taking them?" Richard asked, his voice rough. "The chairperson has requested a full audit of the hotel's Q3 expenditures, a routine matter for a new leadership team." Harrison's eyes held a flicker of something Richard couldn't place. Was it pity? "Actually, Mr. Sterling, the chairperson has been asking for you. She would like to meet with you. She feels it's time you were formally welcomed. Her assistant will be calling your suite shortly to arrange a meeting. This afternoon in her office." Richard's blood ran cold. The net was closing. This was no coincidence. The cancelled yacht, the blocked restaurant, the declined credit card, and now a summons. It was all connected, a series of precisely executed moves in a game he hadn't even known he was playing, and he had a sickening feeling that he was about to meet the Grand Master. The call came 10 minutes after Richard returned to the suite. A crisp female voice, polite but firm, informed him that the chairperson would see him at 3:00 p.m. sharp. Not in her office, as Mr. Harrison had suggested, but in the celestial suite itself. She would be coming to him. The audacity of it was staggering. She was commandeering his ludicrously expensive suite for a meeting, treating him not as a premier guest, but as a subordinate to be visited at her convenience. Sienna returned from the spa, glowing and relaxed, oblivious to the storm brewing in Richard's mind. That was divine. She sighed, draping herself over a chaise lounge. "You should have seen the gold leaf facial. My skin feels like silk. What should we do this afternoon? Maybe we can try that indoor ski slope. We have a meeting, Sienna," Richard said, his voice tight. "Here, at 3. "A meeting with who?" she asked, sitting up, a flicker of professional interest in her eyes. "Is it business? Should I prepare something?" "You should prepare to be quiet," he snapped. The cruelty of the remark hung in the air between them. Sienna's face fell a mixture of hurt and surprise. "Richard, what's wrong? You've been acting strange since last night. Nothing is wrong." He lied, pacing the vast living room. Just be ready and be presentable. At precisely 3:58 p.m., Javier the butler entered the room. "They are on their way up, sir." He announced, his expression as impassive as ever. He proceeded to arrange a tray of sparkling water and coffee on a low marble table, moving with a calm efficiency that grated on Richard's frayed nerves. Richard straightened his tie. He had chosen his most formidable suit, a bespoke piece from Savile Row. He was Richard Sterling. He'd faced down hostile boards and corporate raiders. He would not be intimidated by some new money woman throwing her weight around. He would hear her out, make his displeasure known, and then demand the compensation and service befitting his status. Sienna, sensing the gravity of the moment, had changed into a conservative but elegant dress, sitting silently on the sofa, her hands folded in her lap. The doorbell chimed a soft, melodic sound that seemed to echo the frantic beating of Richard's heart. Javier opened the massive double doors. The first person to enter was David Chen, a man Richard vaguely recognized. Chen was a notoriously sharp corporate lawyer in London, known for handling high-stakes, discreet acquisitions for old money families. What was he doing here? Following him were two other people, a man and a woman, both with the severe, focused expressions of top-tier executives. They flanked the entrance like a royal guard. And then she walked in. The world seemed to slow down the sound in the room, becoming muffled distant. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't some unknown business tycoon. It was Catherine, his wife. She was not the Catherine he had left in London. The woman who entered the celestial suite was a stranger reborn. Her usual, comfortable, elegant attire was gone, replaced by a tailored Armani power suit in a shade of deep sapphire that made her eyes look like chips of ice. Her hair, which she usually wore in a soft, simple style, was swept up in a severe, elegant chignon that highlighted the sharp, intelligent lines of her face. She wore no jewelry, except for a pair of diamond studs and her simple platinum wedding band, a detail that felt in that moment like the most profound insult of all. She walked with a poise and an unshakable confidence he had never seen before. Her eyes, cool and analytical, swept the room, taking in the opulent surroundings, Sienna's frozen form on the sofa, and finally Richard's own slack-jawed disbelief. Richard's mind struggled to process the scene. It was a cognitive dissonance of the highest order. This was Catherine, the woman who organized his sock drawer, who reminded him of his mother's birthday, who he thought was currently tasting cake samples for a children's hospital fundraiser. To see her here in this context, flanked by a legal shark and executives radiating an aura of absolute authority, was like seeing a house cat suddenly transform into a panther. Sienna let out a small, almost imperceptible gasp. Her eyes darted from Catherine to Richard, and back again, the terrible realization dawning on her face. She looked like a child caught with her hand in the cookie jar, exposed and utterly terrified. Catherine's gaze lingered on Sienna for a moment, a look devoid of heat or anger. It was something far worse, a look of complete and utter dismissal, as if she were observing a mildly interesting piece of furniture. Then her eyes locked with Richard's. "Hello, Richard," she said, her voice the same calm, measured tone she used when discussing grocery lists, yet it cut through the silence of the room like a shard of glass. "I see you received my upgrade." He couldn't speak. His throat was dry, his mind a maelstrom of confusion and rising panic. He felt the floor drop out from beneath him. Every strange event of the past 36 hours snapped into horrifying focus: the upgrade to this specific suite, the thorough new chairperson, the cancelled amenities, the blocked credit card, the accountants in the lobby. It wasn't a series of unfortunate events. It was a strategy, a campaign, a meticulously planned ambush. Catherine walked calmly to the head of the large rosewood dining table that dominated one end of the suite. She didn't sit, but placed her hands on the back of the chair, claiming the position of power. David Chen and the other two executives took their places behind her. "Please sit down, Richard," she said. It was not a request. It was an order. "You too, Ms. Vance. I believe we have a great deal to discuss." Richard's legs felt like lead, but he moved mechanically toward the table, his eyes never leaving his wife's face. He was looking for a sign of the woman he knew, a flicker of doubt, a hint of anger, anything familiar. He found nothing. He found only the cool, detached serenity of a predator that knows its prey is cornered. He had checked into a 7-star resort with his mistress, believing he was the king of the world. He had just discovered his wife didn't just own the castle. She had built the trap, baited it with his own arrogance, and was now preparing to snap it shut. The unveiling was complete. The execution was about to begin. Richard finally found his voice, a ragged, incredulous whisper. "Catherine, what is this? What are you doing here?" Catherine gestured for David Chen to distribute folders to the other executives. She didn't look at Richard as she spoke, her focus on the task at hand, as if he were a minor agenda item in a much larger meeting. "My great-uncle Alistair Harrington passed away 2 months ago," she said, her voice a cool, level river of sound. "You met him once, I believe. At our wedding, you found him dull, a doddering old man who owned a few hotels. You paid him no attention." She paused, finally lifting her eyes to meet his. Lord Harrington, as the world knew him, never married and had no children. He was a very private man. What you and the rest of the world never knew was that my mother was his half-sister, from a liaison he had in his youth. He remained close to our side of the family discreetly. In his will, he left his entire estate to me. That includes his controlling 68% stake in the Ethelred Hospitality Group. The air left Richard's lungs. He felt Sienna flinch beside him. He remembered the old man at the wedding, quiet, unassuming, with watery eyes. He'd dismissed him as a relic who apparently owned a multi-billion-dollar global empire. For the past 8 weeks, Catherine continued her gaze unwavering. "Mr. Chen and I have been overseeing a quiet transition of power. We've been conducting a thorough review of all operations, assets, and liabilities. It's been illuminating." She walked slowly around the table until she was standing directly behind Richard's chair. He could feel the sheer force of her presence, a pressure he had never imagined she could exert. He resisted the urge to shrink away. "When I took over, I started by reviewing the executive accounts at our flagship properties. Imagine my surprise when I found a reservation for the Imperial Sky Suite here in Dubai, booked under the name A. Blackwood, a shell account I knew you used for discretionary expenses. An account you foolishly linked to a corporate card from Sterling Capital for the initial deposit." Her voice was calm, but every word was a precision strike. I was intrigued. I wondered who A. Blackwood could be. So I took the liberty of checking the flight manifests from London. And there you were, Richard Sterling. And next to your name, another ticket booked at the same time for the same flight. Sienna Vance. She finally looked at Sienna, who had gone pale. "Ms. Vance, you work in the marketing department at Sterling Capital. Correct, a junior analyst, I believe. Your performance reviews are mediocre, yet your travel budget seems to be astronomical. I imagine we'll be discussing that discrepancy with your CEO very soon." Sienna looked as if she'd been slapped. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Catherine turned her attention back to Richard. So I decided to make your little holiday more comfortable. I upgraded you to the Celestial Suite. It has the best security, the best surveillance. Every word, every transaction, every request you've made since setting foot on my property has been logged. My property, Richard. She let that sink in. The sheer terrifying scale of her control was becoming clear. He wasn't just caught. He was catalogued, recorded, and dissected. The yacht, she said, a small, mirthless smile touching her lips. Reserved for a board meeting. The restaurant I was hosting my new executive team. Your credit card. That was me. While you were enjoying your flight, I was on a conference call with our family solicitor and the fraud department at the bank. I've had a temporary freeze placed on all our joint assets pending a full forensic audit, which I can assure you is already underway. Richard felt a surge of desperate, impotent fury. You can't do that. That's my money. Is it? Catherine's voice dropped, becoming dangerously quiet. Is it your money, Richard? Or is it our money? The fortune you built was on a foundation that I maintained. The home I ran, the clients I entertained, the social connections I nurtured. While you were playing the titan of industry, I was the silent partner who made it all possible. And you took our money, our joint resources, and you spent it on this. She gestured vaguely at Sienna, the insult more potent for its lack of focus. This is insane, Catherine Richard blustered, trying to regain some semblance of control. This is a private matter, a marital dispute. You're airing it in front of employees. These are not my employees, Richard. This is my board, she corrected him coldly. And this is no longer a marital dispute. You made it a corporate one the moment you started embezzling company funds to finance your affairs. And you made it a public one the moment you decided to humiliate me. You just didn't realize the public had changed. She walked back to the head of the table, a queen surveying her domain. You see, Richard, for 15 years, you saw me as a decorative, useful object. Someone to manage the house and raise the children you never actually wanted. You saw a quiet, unassuming woman who wouldn't make waves. You never bothered to look closer. You never knew I graduated top of my class from the London School of Economics. You never knew I managed my own family's investment portfolio for a decade before we met, doubling its value. You never knew because you never asked. You just assumed I was less. The truth of her words hit him with the force of a physical blow. She was right. He had never asked. He had never cared. He had seen her only in relation to himself, a satellite orbiting his magnificent sun. He had been so blinded by his own ego that he had missed the blazing star right beside him. So here are the new rules, Catherine stated, her tone shifting from explanation to command. You and Miss Vance will remain in this suite until tomorrow morning. Your passports are being held at the front desk. At 9:04 a.m., a car will take you to the airport. You will be flying back to London. Commercial. Middle seat. I've taken the liberty of booking it for you. Your things from the house will be delivered to your small apartment I have leased for you in Canary Wharf. All you will find there are your clothes and your personal effects. Everything else, the house, the art, the cars, are marital assets, currently frozen. She looked at David Chen. David will be serving you with divorce papers the moment you land. The terms will be non-negotiable. I am petitioning for a dissolution on the grounds of adultery and financial misconduct. I have ample evidence for both. She turned her gaze back to Richard, her eyes devoid of any emotion but a chilling finality. You came here for a week of pleasure at my expense. Instead, you will receive a lesson in consequences. You underestimated me, Richard. You thought I was a pawn in your game. That was your first and your last mistake. It was a perfect checkmate. A queen's gambit executed with breathtaking precision. He had been outmaneuvered at every turn by the one person he believed he had completely under his control. The game was over. He had already lost. The silence that followed Catherine's declaration was heavy and suffocating. Richard stared at her, his mind struggling to grasp the sheer totality of his ruin. It was one thing to be caught, another to be so comprehensively and systematically dismantled. His life, as he knew it, had been hollowed out in the space of 10 minutes. Sienna was the first to break. A choked sob escaped her lips. I didn't know, she stammered, looking at Catherine with wide, terrified eyes. He told me that you had a separate life, an understanding. Catherine's gaze flickered towards her, cold and uninterested. He told you what you wanted to hear, Miss Vance, and you heard what you wanted to believe. Your naivety is your own problem. I'd suggest you contact a lawyer. Sterling Capital's board will be receiving a full dossier of your expense reports tomorrow morning. I doubt your employment will survive the week. With a final sharp nod to her team, Catherine turned and walked towards the door. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. The damage was done. David Chen placed a single thick envelope on the table in front of Richard before following her out. The heavy thud of the closing doors echoed the finality of a prison cell. For a long moment, only the sound of Sienna's quiet weeping filled the room. Richard sat motionless, staring at the envelope. Divorce papers, financial disclosures, the blueprint of his own destruction. Finally, the dam of his pride broke, and a torrent of rage poured forth. He swept his arm across the table, sending the elegant water glasses and coffee service crashing to the marble floor. She can't do this. He roared the sound, animalistic and raw. She can't take everything. She just did. Richard Sienna whispered, her face streaked with mascara. She has everything. She owns the hotel, the lawyers, the accountants. She owns you. The truth in her words was a physical blow. He staggered to the window, looking out over the glittering Dubai skyline, a vista that only an hour ago had seemed a monument to his own success. Now it was just a view from a cage. He grabbed his phone, his hands trembling, and tried to call his office, his executive assistant, his lawyer. Anyone. The number you have dialed is not reachable, a cool, automated voice informed him. He tried again. Same result. Javier the butler materialized from a service entrance, a dustpan and brush in his hand. The chairperson has temporarily suspended all external communications from this suite, sir, he said calmly, beginning to sweep up the broken glass. For your privacy. My privacy, Richard laughed, a harsh, broken sound. This isn't about privacy. This is a prison. As you say, Sir Javier replied, his tone unchanging. The rest of the day passed in a haze of surreal horror. They were trapped. The televisions played only a continuous loop of serene, generic resort advertisements. The internet was down. Their cell phones had no service. They were in an ivory tower, completely cut off from the world. Javier served them meals they didn't touch. Sienna, after a period of hysterical crying, retreated into a cold, resentful silence. She sat on the far side of the massive living room, staring at Richard with an expression of pure loathing. You ruined my life, she said, her voice flat and dead. I'm going to lose my job, my career. For what for you? You're nothing. You're just a shell. She took everything. Shut up, Sienna, he muttered, rubbing his temples. A splitting headache was building behind his eyes. No, I won't shut up. She shot back, her voice rising. You used me. You made all these promises about promotions, about a future. You told me your wife was just a business arrangement. You lied about everything. You're not a titan. You're a fool. And you let her make a fool out of me, too. The accusation hit its mark. He was a fool. He had paraded his mistress into the lion's den, and the lioness had been his own wife. His arrogance had been his undoing. That evening, as darkness fell, Richard's phone buzzed. He looked down, shocked to see he had a signal. A single email had come through. It was from his partner at Sterling Capital, Geoffrey. The subject line was stark, urgent, board meeting. Richard's hands shook as he opened it. Richard, we've been contacted by legal counsel representing the Ethelred Hospitality Group. They have presented us with evidence of significant financial impropriety on your part, misuse of corporate funds, fraudulent expense claims, and the leveraging of company assets for personal use. An emergency board meeting has been convened. We have been advised that forensic accountants hired by Mrs. Sterling will be arriving at our London office tomorrow morning to begin a full audit of your accounts. Richard, what in God's name have you done? Your trading passwords have been revoked, and you are suspended effective immediately pending the outcome of this investigation. Do not contact the office. Geoffrey. It was a corporate death sentence. Catherine hadn't just attacked his personal life. She had decapitated his professional one. She had gone for the jugular, using the very evidence he had provided her to turn his own partners against him. The Sterling and Sterling Capital was about to become a toxic asset. The legacy he had spent his life building was crumbling into dust, and he was forced to watch from half a world away, trapped in a suite paid for, with the very funds that were now being used as evidence against him. He dropped the phone. The screen cracked against the marble floor. He looked around the opulent suite, the silk wallpaper, the priceless art, the starlight roof, and felt an overwhelming wave of claustrophobia. This beautiful room was his tomb. Catherine hadn't just divorced him. She had buried him. He had lost his wife, his fortune, his company, and his reputation all in less than a day. The Sterling legacy was over. He was no longer a king. He was just a man in a locked room, waiting for his life to be dismantled piece by piece. As dawn broke over the Arabian Gulf, painting the sky in hues of soft pink and orange, Richard was a broken man. He hadn't slept. He sat in an armchair, still in his suit from the day before, staring blankly at the sunrise. The fight had gone out of him, replaced by a hollow, cavernous despair. Sienna was nowhere to be seen. She had locked herself in one of the guest bedrooms, and he had only heard the faint sound of her talking on the phone in hushed, frantic tones in the middle of the night. He assumed she had somehow found a way to contact a lawyer or her family. He no longer cared. At 7:00 a.m., there was a soft knock on the door. It was Javier. "Ms. Vance has requested to see the chairperson, sir. A car is waiting to take her to the executive wing." Richard looked up, confused. What does she want with Catherine? I was not privy to the details. Sir Javier set his face, impassive. The chairperson has agreed to see her. Richard watched, bewildered, as Sienna emerged from the bedroom. She was dressed in the clothes she had arrived in, her face pale, but her expression set with a new, hard determination. She clutched her handbag as if it contained state secrets. She didn't even glance at Richard as she walked out of the suite, escorted by a member of the hotel's security team. He was alone, left to stew in the remnants of his shattered life. What could Sienna possibly have to say to Catherine? Was she going to plead for her job? Beg for mercy? The idea seemed laughable. Catherine was not a merciful woman. He knew that now. In another part of the hotel, in a minimalist office with a panoramic view of the ocean, Catherine Sterling sat behind a large, clear glass desk. She listened patiently as Sienna Vance, perched nervously on the edge of a chair opposite her, finished speaking. And that's everything Sienna said, her voice trembling slightly. It's all on this flash drive. Copies of his private ledgers from his office computer. He kept a separate set of books, ones his partners didn't know about. It details how he used investor funds to cover personal losses in the market. There are also emails, correspondence with at least 2 other women, both junior employees at rival firms. He was trading inside information for favors. Catherine took the small silver flash drive Sienna held out. She examined it for a moment, before placing it carefully on her desk. She looked at the young woman before her, not with anger or pity, but with the cool appraisal of a chess master considering an unexpected move. "Why are you giving me this?" Miss Vance Catherine asked, her voice even. "Yesterday you were his partner in this deception. Today you are offering me the evidence to put him in prison." Sienna took a deep breath, steeling herself. "Yesterday I thought Richard was a king, and I thought I could be his queen. Today I know he's a fool who was brought down by his own wife. And I know you, Mrs. Sterling. You are the one with the real power. He used me. He saw me as a disposable asset, a perk of his job. He was going to discard me the moment this was over, just like he discarded you." She corrected herself quickly. "Or how he thought he discarded you." She leaned forward slightly, her eyes earnest. "I'm not a good person. I know that. I was ambitious, and I made a terrible choice. But I am not stupid. My career is over. My reputation in London is ruined. I have nothing to gain by protecting him, but I have everything to gain by helping you. And what is it you hope to gain?" Catherine asked, her expression unreadable. "A clean break," Sienna said immediately. "I want the dossier you have on me to be buried. I want a severance package from Sterling Capital enough to let me relocate and start over somewhere else. New York, maybe. And I want a guarantee that I will not be named as a party in any legal proceedings against him. I will be a confidential informant. Your secret weapon?" It was a bold, shameless proposal. A trade of high-level corporate espionage for personal salvation. The old Catherine, the one who planned charity galas, would have been horrified. She would have shown this opportunistic young woman the door. But the new Catherine, the chairperson of the Ethelred Group, saw the strategic value. This wasn't about morality. It was about leverage. Sienna's information was not just a nail in Richard's coffin. It was the entire foundry. It moved the case from a messy, albeit straightforward divorce and embezzlement scandal into the realm of serious financial crime. It would give her absolute, unassailable power in the divorce settlement and would ensure Richard Sterling never worked in finance again. It would protect the assets for her future and for the children she had once hoped to have with him. "You understand," Catherine said slowly, "that if I agree to this, your betrayal of him will be as complete as his was of me." "His betrayal was for pleasure," Sienna retorted, a bitter edge to her voice. "Mine is for survival. There's a difference." Catherine was silent for a long time, her fingers steepled in front of her. She looked out at the calm, blue expanse of the sea. Richard had always underestimated her. Sienna had too. They both saw women as either obstacles or objects. They had failed to see them as allies, even temporary ones. An alliance born not of friendship, but of shared scorn and mutual benefit. It was a cold, transactional arrangement. It was the language of business, the language Richard had taught her ironically to understand so well. Finally, she looked back at Sienna. "Have Mr. Chen drawn up an agreement?" she said, her voice decisive. "Full immunity and a one-time payment of £250,000, contingent on the information on this drive being verified. You will sign a non-disclosure agreement, so ironclad you won't be able to say the name Sterling for the rest of your life. In return, the file on your desk at Sterling Capital disappears. Do we have a deal? Sienna's shoulders sagged with relief. Yes, Mrs. Sterling, we have a deal. Catherine nodded curtly. Good. Now get out of my office. A car will take you to the airport. Your flight to London leaves in 3 hours. You will fly home, clear out your desk and disappear. I never want to see you again. Sienna didn't need to be told twice. She stood up and practically fled the room. Catherine was left alone with the small silver flash drive. It was a vile little thing, a monument to deceit and corruption, but it was also the key to her final victory. She picked it up, her expression cold and resolute. Richard had created this mess, cultivating a world of lies with ambitious, immoral people like Sienna. It was only fitting that his downfall be delivered by one of his own creations. Richard was escorted from the celestial suite at precisely 8:45 a.m. 2 stoic security guards flanked him, not touching him, but their presence, making it clear this was not a voluntary departure. Mr. Harrison was waiting by the private elevator, his face a mask of professional regret. Mr. Sterling, I trust your stay under the circumstances was memorable, he said. Richard just stared at him, hollow-eyed. The elevator descended in silence, a symbolic journey from the pinnacle of luxury to the nadir of his existence. He was led not through the grand lobby, but through a series of sterile service corridors, a final, calculated humiliation to ensure he wasn't seen by the other guests. The car waiting for him wasn't a Rolls-Royce. It was a standard black sedan. As he was about to get in another vehicle, a sleek black Bentley pulled up beside it. The rear window glided down, and there was Catherine. She was dressed more casually now, in elegant linen trousers and a silk blouse, a pair of dark sunglasses shielding her eyes. She looked serene, rested, and powerful. One last thing, Richard, she said, her voice calm and clear through the morning air. She gestured for him to come closer. Reluctantly, he approached her window. She held up the small silver flash drive. Miss Vance was very forthcoming, she said. She provided me with a rather detailed account of your extracurricular financial activities. Market manipulation, insider trading, defrauding investors. It's all here. Richard felt the last of his strength drain away. Sienna. She had sold him out. Of course she had. In his world, loyalty was a currency, and his had just been devalued to 0. This Catherine continued holding up the drive is my leverage. It ensures you will not contest the divorce. You will not fight me on the asset division. You will sign everything David Chen puts in front of you, without a single amendment. You will walk away with nothing but the clothes you are wearing and a small trust fund I've set up for you, enough to live on, but not enough to ever be powerful again. You will be a ghost, Richard. A footnote. He wanted to scream, to rage, to protest his innocence, but the words wouldn't come. He had no innocence left. Why, he finally managed to ask his voice a hoarse croak. Why go to all this trouble, Catherine? Why not just divorce me? She finally took off her sunglasses, and he saw her eyes clearly. There was no hatred in them. There was no anger. There was only a profound, weary disappointment. Because for 15 years I gave you my life, she said, her voice soft but unforgiving. I believed in the man I married. And you took that belief, and you took my loyalty, and you shredded it for the sake of your ego and cheap thrills. You didn't just cheat on me, Richard. You erased me. You made me feel invisible. So I decided to show you what I was capable of when I finally chose to be seen. She paused, looking past him at the magnificent structure of the Serafina Grand, her hotel, her empire. This was never just about your affair. This was about me reclaiming the power you never knew I had. This was about me reminding you, and the world, that the quietest person in the room is often the one you should fear the most. She put her sunglasses back on the gesture, a clear dismissal. The SEC and the Financial Conduct Authority will be receiving an anonymous tip in the coming weeks. I'd suggest you find a very good criminal lawyer. You're going to need one. The window glided up, sealing him off. The Bentley pulled away smoothly, disappearing down the pristine driveway without a backward glance. Richard stood there for a long moment, the Dubai sun beating down on him. He was no longer Richard Sterling, the titan of finance. He was just a man in a rumpled suit, standing in a service driveway, stripped of everything he had ever valued. He had played a game without knowing the rules against an opponent he had never even seen. He got into the back of the sedan. The driver, a stranger, didn't speak. As the car pulled away from the resort, Richard looked back at the gleaming tower of the Serafina Grand. It was a monument to wealth, power, and his own catastrophic hubris. High above in the celestial suite, the starlight roof was probably being polished. The broken glass swept away, the room prepared for its next guest. The gilded cage was being reset. His wife, Catherine Sterling, the new chairperson, was already at her desk, sipping her morning tea, taking control of the world he had left behind. Checkmate had been declared at dawn, and he had been swept from the board. The story of Richard Sterling isn't just a tale of infidelity. It's a stark reminder that the deepest betrayals often blind us to the power we've underestimated in others. He saw his wife as a part of his life's scenery, only to discover she was the architect of its design, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal the shocking truth of her own strength. This narrative of a woman reclaiming her power in the most spectacular way possible is a testament to the fact that consequences, when they arrive, are often as grand and meticulously planned as the sins that preceded them. If this story of poetic justice, intricate plotting, and a stunning reversal of fortune captivated you, please show your support. Hit that like button. Share this video with someone who would appreciate a story of ultimate karma, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel for more tales of drama, intrigue, and the shocking twists that life can deliver. Don't miss what's coming next.